Luigi's Mansion is often regarded as one of the strangest, yet somehow most charming games in the Mario series' pantheon of titles. Unlike the usual titles, Luigi's Mansion handed over the spotlight to the younger and most often ignored Mario brother, Luigi. Ironically enough as well, despite the obvious differences in main character, general gameplay, mechanics, and its setting, Luigi's Mansion also has another thing of note. You see, this is the closest to a horror-type experience Nintendo is ever likely to develop, bearing in mind that obviously we're still talking about the Mario series, and thus things never get traumatizing levels of scary. Regardless, despite how absolutely ridiculous it may sound, Luigi's Mansion actually utilizes several elements that make it an extremely interesting horror game. Now first I need to define what I mean by horror. You see, despite what some people think, some horror doesn't have to completely focus on unfrightening jump scares and cheap tricks. In fact, some horror, surprisingly enough, can utilize interesting build-up to make what I'd call real horror. Now let's look back at Luigi's Mansion, because there's quite a lot to discuss. The introduction of this game is amazing at building up a tense atmosphere that you wouldn't expect from a Mario game. Luigi enters this mansion in the middle of nowhere, with little more than a flashlight. As the player will soon realize, you have little in the way of defense, as the flashlight is unlikely to be of any significant help. This leaves the player in a vulnerable state, which is always a good start in a horror experience. You don't want the player feeling too powerful right away, and thus this leaves them in a state that makes the already tense atmosphere more tense. Also, let's talk about said atmosphere. From the onset of the title screen to the ending of the game, Luigi's Mansion is unnervingly creepy compared to the usual Mario fare. Unlike the usual atmosphere in most Mario games, which relies on a bouncy and fun world, Luigi's Mansion is notably darker in the atmosphere department. The lighting is much darker, not only noticeable in the obviously darkened rooms, but even in the lit rooms it feels dimly lit and lacking in any color. Regardless of where, the mansion feels dark, and this builds well into the other aspects of its atmosphere. You see, one of the most frightening aspects of any haunted attraction is the idea of loneliness and the thought that the area has gone unexplored for ages. The mansion fully showcases this ideal from the onset as well. Throughout the mansion, a thick layer of dust seems to coat every surface, or at least that's what I could gather from the multitude of particle effects. The furniture and design of the mansion looks notably aged, and the cobwebs present throughout showcase the obvious age the mansion is supposed to give off. All of these aspects give the idea that the mansion has been uninhabited and unexplored for quite a long time. This adds to the fact that the mansion is lacking in any serious life forms. With the exception of the Toads, who were never really much help in the past games anyways, there exists no other life forms within the mansion. Everything from the people down to the mice and bats, they're all completely ghosts. This helps to build this lonely atmosphere as the player continues onward through the mansion. You realize that not only is the mansion old and unexplored, but that there's no one around to save you if things go wrong. This makes the exploration just a bit more frightening because there's a very present and obvious danger. Even the soundtrack adds to this atmosphere. The soundtrack is notably lacking in any kind of comfort. A large chunk of the soundtrack is made up of techno sounds, obviously making the soundtrack sound kind of foreign. Obviously, it sounds creepy, but beyond that, the music sounds unnatural. It's the perfect fit for a mansion full of the paranormal. Instruments used are often the piano, which is notable considering that the piano itself can often sound dreary and unfriendly, even somber at times. Even the main theme is pulsing and uncomfortable, only occasionally being met with Luigi's frightened humming. Even the audio in this game is doing its best to make you feel oppressed and alone. It's practically choking you in a game that's full of the same dreary atmosphere throughout. The atmosphere is used to make the actual gameplay feel even scarier. One notable example comes after the completion of Area 3. By this point, the game has gotten across the idea that lit rooms are safe and dark rooms are unpredictable. Even the hallways become significantly more comfortable once an area is completed. In fact, by this point in the game, the player has about 80% of the mansion completely lit up. Obviously, some of the oppressive atmosphere is lost at this point, and the player is put into a much more comfortable mindset. And this is where the whole idea is used against the player. In one fell swoop, a blackout occurs, leaving every previously lit room completely dark. Suddenly, the player's own confidence and comfort is pulled away from them, and in moves a sense of immediate danger. Obviously, the large amount of now present ghosts are frightening and dangerous, but this adds to the other obvious problem. How do you turn the lights back on? A first-time player in general will have little hints as to where the breaker switch is, and even less will know exactly where Uncle Grimly is, who needs to be captured during the blackout itself. Take away the previous life forms present in the mansion, as the Toads vanish during the blackout, and the player is left in a situation where they are completely and utterly alone. With this already imposing atmosphere running at full force, exploring the rooms to find a way out of this predicament isn't just scary, it's borderline terrifying. It's just interesting to see the amount of surprisingly well done horror in Luigi's Mansion. The atmosphere has insane levels of detail, and this leads to a game that is much more dreary and creepy than any adventure Mario has ever gone on. With all the details the game contains to mess with you, it's no wonder that most kids playing it at the time found the game genuinely frightening. Now sure, most of us have gotten old enough where that doesn't necessarily matter, but even now I find the atmosphere of Luigi's Mansion an interesting prospect. Sure, it no longer scares me, but even now it still has an effect on me. Whether it be from previous trauma of the game or its brilliant design, there's an ever-present sense of dread no matter how many times I play it. That's one powerful game. Or maybe I'm looking too deeply into this. I guess that's game over. Analysis. I hope you enjoyed. But what did you think of Luigi's Mansion's atmosphere? Did it frighten you as a child? Does it still mess with you now? What do you think of the game nowadays? Why not tell me in the comments below? And heck, if you enjoyed the video, why not subscribe or like the video? Either is appreciated. Or perhaps check out my video on the new Bubsy announcement and how it's all our fault the Bubster is back. Whatever you do, I hope to see you again. See you later.